Welcome back to our cozy forest adventures. Join Hazel, Brindle, Pip, and Finn as they embark on a brand new journey through the woods, discovering surprises, friendship, and tiny magical moments along the way. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming forest tales. Sweet dreams and happy listening. Stories from the Grove. The sun rose gently over the forest, sending warm beams of light through the branches. The leaves glittered with drops of dew, and the air was filled with the sound of chirping birds. It was the kind of morning that made every creature stop for a moment, stretch, and smile. Hazel the bunny hopped out of her burrow, her ears tall and twitching. She sniffed the cool air and wriggled her nose. Today felt special, though she couldn't quite say why. Her little home was tucked under a hazel bush, which is how she got her name, and outside her door, she kept a neat row of flowers and a small stone path leading into the woods. "Good morning, world," Hazel said softly, her whiskers brushing a yellow buttercup. Not far away, Brindle the badger was already awake. He was strong and sturdy, with a thick coat of black and white fur. He had a kind heart, though his gruff voice sometimes made him sound cross when he wasn't. Brindle was busy stacking wood outside his den, preparing for the cool nights that were sure to come. Down by the stream, two frogs, Finn and Pip, were having a lively argument. Finn, tall and slim, wanted to leap across the widest part of the stream. Pip, who was round and cautious, shook his head. "You'll fall in, Finn, and then who will help pull you out?" "Not me," Pip croaked nervously. Finn laughed, his green skin shining in the sun. "That's the fun of it, Pip. If I fall, I'll just swim." High in the branches of an old oak tree, Elder the owl opened one golden eye. He watched the young animals below with a quiet smile. He had seen many mornings like this, but he never tired of the forest waking up. Elder carried the wisdom of many seasons, and though he rarely left his tree during the day, all the creatures came to him for advice. Hazel, carrying a small basket, hopped down the path toward the stream. She wanted to pick berries for a pie. Her ears flicked as she heard Finn and Pip splashing. "What are you two up to this time?" she asked, smiling as she reached the bank. "Finn wants to jump across the big part of the stream," Pip complained, crossing his little arms. Hazel laughed, the sound like a soft bell. "Of course he does." Brindle soon joined them, carrying a bundle of sticks tied with twine. "If he falls, we can build him a raft," he said, though his tone made it hard to tell if he was joking. The friends stood together at the edge of the water, the morning sunlight dancing on the ripples. The forest around them seemed full of promise, as though an adventure was waiting just beyond the bend in the stream. And indeed it was. Finn crouched low, his eyes fixed on the wide stretch of water. "Watch closely," he said, puffing out his chest. "This is going to be the biggest leap anyone has ever seen." Hazel tilted her head. "Bigger than the time you tried to hop over Brindle's woodpile and knocked half of it down?" Brindle gave a deep chuckle, shaking his head. "I remember that. Took us an hour to stack it all back." Finn flicked water at them with his foot. "That was different. This time I've measured it." Pip's eyes grew round. "Measured it? With what?" Finn tapped his long leg proudly. "With these." Hazel giggled, while Brindle muttered, "Legs aren't measuring sticks." Still, the others gathered to watch. The stream sparkled in the sunlight, and dragonflies zipped above it, their wings humming softly. Finn took a deep breath, bent his knees, and sprang. For a glorious moment, it looked as if he might actually make it. His body arched high, and the water glittered beneath him. Then, splash, he landed right in the middle, sending ripples racing across the stream. Pip squealed and jumped back from the spray. Hazel clapped her paws over her mouth, trying not to laugh. Brindle let out a long sigh. Finn popped his head above the surface, blinking water out his eyes. "Well," he croaked, "that was almost." Hazel couldn't hold back her giggles any longer. "You look like a flying fish." Even Brindle chuckled again, though he tried to hide it behind a paw. Pip leaned over the edge, shaking his head. What did I say? Didn't I say this would happen? Finn swam to the bank and climbed out, water dripping from his green skin. All part of the plan, he said with a grin, though his legs were covered in bits of pondweed. Hazel set down her basket and offered him a paw. Come on, Frog. Let's get you out of the weeds before you start looking like a salad. The group laughed together, their voices carrying through the trees. Above them, Elder the Owl gave a soft hoot, though no one could tell if it was amusement or simply approval. As the laughter faded, Hazel glanced toward the far end of the stream. The trees grew denser there, their branches knitting together like fingers. She felt a small shiver of curiosity. I wonder what's beyond that bend, she said quietly. Brindle followed her gaze, his brow furrowing. Old places, he rumbled. Ruins and roots. Not many go that way. But Finn, still dripping, perked up immediately. Then, that's where we should go next. Hazel's ears twitched, and Pip groaned. A new adventure was about to begin. The friends followed the stream as it curved into the thicker part of the woods. Sunlight slipped through the branches in golden streaks, and the air smelled of damp earth and wild mint. Every so often, a bird called from the canopy, and the sound echoed like a gentle bell. Hazel hopped lightly ahead, her basket swinging at her side. It feels different here, she said. Quieter. Brindle trudged behind her, his heavy paws pressing into the moss. That's because most creatures stay in the brighter parts of the forest. Shadows make them uneasy. Pip's tail twitched nervously. Shadows make me uneasy too. Finn leapt from rock to rock along the stream's edge, still full of energy. That's what makes it exciting. You never know what you'll find. The path narrowed until the stream widened into a small pond. At its far side stood the remains of an old wooden structure, its beams tilted and wrapped in ivy. A broken water wheel leaned against the bank, half hidden by reeds. Hazel stopped, her eyes wide. It's a mill. The others gathered beside her, staring at the ruins. The mill looked forgotten, yet there was a certain grace in the way nature had claimed it back. Flowers blooming through cracks in the stone, and a willow tree leaning protectively over its roof. Finn hopped forward eagerly. Let's look inside. Pip squeaked. Inside? In there? What if it collapses? What if there are spiders? What if? Brindle laid a paw on his shoulder. Then we'll be careful. No harm in taking a look. The friends approached slowly. The wooden door hung crookedly, creaking when Hazel pushed it open. Dust drifted in the air, and the smell of damp wood filled their noses. Inside, the floor was covered in leaves, and sunlight streamed through gaps in the roof. Hazel tiptoed forward, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. In the center of the room stood a stone grinding wheel, cracked but still solid. And lying against it, half buried in dust, was something shiny. She bent down and brushed the dirt away. A pocket watch, silver and smooth, glimmered in her paws. Its cover was engraved with twisting vines, and though its hands were still, it felt warm. Look at this, Hazel whispered. The others crowded around, their reflections caught in the polished case. For a moment, none of them spoke. The forest outside seemed to hold its breath. Brindle leaned closer, his whiskers brushing Hazel's paw as he studied the pocket watch. Strange, he murmured. It looks new, but this place has been empty for years. Finn's eyes gleamed with excitement. Maybe it's magic. Maybe if we open it, it'll tell us a secret. Pip's ears flattened tight against his head. Or maybe it's cursed. Things left behind in spooky places are always cursed. Hazel ran her paw gently over the engraved vines. The silver felt cool now, almost pulsing like a heartbeat. She hesitated, then pressed the small latch. With a soft click, the watch opened. Inside, the hands lay frozen at 12 o'clock. Yet faintly, so faintly she almost missed it, Hazel heard a tick. One slow, steady tick, then another. The friends leaned in, their ears straining. Brindle frowned. But it's not moving. Finn grinned. It wants to. Maybe it needs us. Pip squeaked and backed away. I don't like the sound of that at all. Just then, a cool draft swept through the mill, stirring the dust into little spirals. The reeds outside rustled though no wind blew, and the shadows seemed to deepen in the corners. Hazel closed the watch quickly, pressing it to her chest. Her heart thudded in time with the faint ticking. She didn't know why, but she felt the object was important, like it belonged to the forest in some way. "We should take it to Elder," she said, her voice steady though her paws trembled. "He'll know what this means." Brindle nodded slowly. "Yes, Elder always knows." Finn bounced on his long legs. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's show him." But Pip tugged at Hazel's arm, his little claws trembling. "Do we have to? Maybe we should just leave it here. Some things are forgotten for a reason." Hazel met his worried eyes and gave a gentle smile. "And some things are found for a reason, too." The mill gave another soft creak, almost like a sigh, as the friends stepped back toward the door. Outside, the sunlight glimmered on the pond, and the forest seemed to listen. With the pocket watch safely in Hazel's basket, the four of them set off toward Elder's Oak, unaware that this small discovery was about to change their days in the forest forever. The path back toward Elder's Oak was calm and bright, the leaves above swaying gently in the breeze. Sunlight played across the ground in golden patches, and every now and then a squirrel darted by, carrying an acorn almost too big for its paws. Hazel kept her basket close. She could still feel the weight of the pocket watch inside, heavier than it looked. It wasn't scary, not at all, but it did feel unusual, important, like something meant to be cared for. Finn hopped alongside her, humming happily. Imagine if the watch could do something clever, like ring a bell when berries are ripe, or chime when it's time for pie. Hazel giggled. "You have it ringing all day then." Pip trailed behind, dragging a little stick along the ground. "I still say we should have left it. What if it belongs to someone who's going to come back looking for it?" Brindle adjusted the bundle of sticks he carried on his shoulder. "Then we'll give it back. No harm in keeping it safe until then." They soon reached the tall oak where Elder liked to sit. His feathers caught the light, making him look almost golden. He watched them approach with calm eyes, then tilted his head when Hazel lifted the basket. "We found something," she said softly, holding out the pocket watch. Elder blinked slowly and lowered his beak to examine it. "Ah," he murmured. "This is not a toy. This is a keeper of time. Long ago, it must have been carried by someone who lived near the mill. Perhaps a miller, perhaps a traveler. Now it rests in your paws." Finn leaned forward eagerly. "What should we do with it?" Elder closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the wind in the branches. "It should not be hidden away. The watch was made to mark the hours, to remind us of seasons passing. Perhaps it is time for it to serve again. If you choose, you may place it where the forest can share it. A sundial of sorts, but with hands that turn." Hazel's ears perked. "We could keep it in the clearing by the willow. Then everyone would know when it's time for gatherings, or when it's close to supper." Pip's eyes widened. "That actually sounds nice." Brindle gave a firm nod. "Then we'll build a little stand for it, strong and sturdy. The watch will be safe and useful too." The group looked at each other, their paws tingling with excitement. What had started as a simple morning by the stream was quickly turning into something bigger, a gift for the whole forest. The very next morning, the four friends met again at the willow clearing. The willow's branches swayed like soft curtains, dipping into the grass. Birds fluttered through the leaves, singing sweet morning songs, and the ground sparkled with dew. Hazel set down her basket, the pocket watch inside wrapped in a cloth. "This is the spot," she said, her ears twitching. "It's sunny most of the day, and everyone knows where it is." Brindle placed a heavy paw on the earth. "Good ground, too. Strong enough for a stand." He set down a bundle of smooth sticks he had gathered, their ends cut neatly. "I thought we could build it together." Finn clapped his long green hands. "Brilliant. I'll help tie the sticks. I'm good with knots." Pip tilted his head. Are you sure about that? Last time you tied knot, my fishing line turned into a giant tangle. Finn grinned. That was on purpose. Special knot. Hazel giggled, then carefully lifted the watch out of her basket. The silver glinted in the sunlight, its engraved vines shining as if they belonged among the willow leaves. It deserves something lovely, she said. Not just sturdy, but welcoming. Maybe we could plant flowers around it, too. That I can do, Pip said quickly, his tail perking up. I know the best spots to dig, and I've got a whole stash of seeds. So they set to work. Brindle hammered the sticks into the soil with his strong paws, forming a little frame. Finn hopped about, tying them together with bits of twine and reed. Hazel polished the watch until it gleamed, while Pip dug tiny holes and sprinkled seeds, marigolds, daisies, and a few bright blue cornflowers. By midday, the stand was ready. It wasn't grand, but it was charming. A small wooden post with a flat shelf, just high enough for all to see. Flowers lined its base, and soft grass framed the path leading to it. Hazel placed the watch gently on the shelf. The hands were still frozen, but the watch looked alive in the sunlight, as though waiting for its moment to begin again. Finn tilted his head. It looks almost like it belongs here. Elder's voice drifted from above, calm and proud. That is because it does. The forest remembers kindness, and it will carry this gift forward. The friends looked at one another and smiled. For the first time, the watch no longer felt mysterious. It felt like there's something to share with everyone who lived among the trees. Word spread quickly through the woods. By the next evening, animals from every corner of the forest were padding, hopping, and fluttering into the willow clearing. Squirrels chattered as they bounded along the branches. Hedgehogs waddled shyly through the grass, and even the shy deer peeked out from between the trees. They gathered in a wide circle, their eyes fixed on the little stand with the silver watch gleaming at its center. The flowers Pip had planted were already sprouting tiny green shoots, and the whole space felt warm and inviting. Hazel stepped forward, smoothing her ears nervously. We found this watch by the old mill, she said. An elder told us it once belonged to someone who lived here long ago. It's been hidden for years, but we thought it should have a place where everyone can see it. Finn hopped up beside her, his voice bright. Now we'll all know the hours together. No more missing suppers, because someone lost track of time. He winked at Pip, who blushed. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Brindle, standing tall and steady, smiled. It's more than that, he said, his deep voice carrying. It's something we've made together, a sign that the forest can care for what's been forgotten. For a moment, there was silence as the animals looked at the watch. Then softly it began, a steady tick, tick, tick. Hazel gasped, her paws flying to her mouth. The watch's hands trembled and slowly began to move, inching forward as if woken from a long sleep. The animals leaned closer, wide-eyed. The ticking grew stronger, matching the rhythm of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the ripple of the stream, the steady beat of countless tiny hearts. It's alive, cried Pip, his tail flicking with excitement. Elder spread his wings from the branch above. Not alive, little one, simply awake. It has found its place again. The clearing filled with chatter and cheers. Some clapped their paws, others stomped their feet, and the birds burst into song. For the first time in memory, the whole forest felt gathered together by one simple thing. Hazel looked around at her friends, her chest warm with pride. It's not just a watch anymore, she whispered. It's a promise that we'll always remember to share our time with each other. Brindle gave a low hum of agreement. And that's the best use of time I can think of. That night, the willow clearing glowed with warmth. Lanterns made of hollowed acorns and glass jars hung from the branches, their soft golden light flickering across the animals' faces. Someone had brought baskets of berries. Another carried warm bread from the burrow ovens, and soon the gathering turned into a feast. Hazel sat with her paws wrapped around a mug of clover tea, watching the watch tick steadily on its little stand. Every so often, she'd glance at it and smile, the silver shining like moonlight in the lantern glow. Finn was busy juggling acorns, much to the delight of a group of young mice, who squeaked and clapped at each toss. Pip darted between groups, making sure no one's plate was empty, his tail a blur of energy. Brindle, meanwhile, kept himself near the food table, pretending to guard the bread while sneaking the occasional slice for himself. "Feels almost like a festival," Hazel murmured. "It is a festival now," Finn said, hopping over and flopping onto the grass beside her. "The festival of the watch." Hazel laughed. "You can't just invent festivals." "Why not?" Finn replied, his grin wide. "Everything starts somewhere. And look, everyone's happy." As the night deepened, Elder Owl lifted his wings and called for quiet. The chatter faded until only the soft ticking of the watch filled the clearing. "My friends," Elder said, his voice carrying like a gentle breeze, "tonight we have done something important. Not because we found a forgotten treasure, but because we chose to share it. The forest grows strongest when we grow together." The animals nodded, some with solemn eyes, others with soft smiles. The words settled into their hearts like seeds. And then, to everyone's surprise, Elder added, "Perhaps it is fitting that each year, at this time, we gather again, to remember the moment the watch began to tick, and to remember that our time is best spent side by side." There was a hush, and then the clearing erupted with cheers. The animals clapped, chirped, and stamped their feet in agreement. The first festival of the watch was born. Hazel leaned back against the willow trunk, watching lantern light sway above her. She felt tired but deeply content, like the forest itself was wrapping her in a blanket. Beside her, Finn whispered, "See? Told you. Festival." Hazel rolled her eyes, but she couldn't stop smiling. The festival of the watch stretched late into the night. Music filled the air. Some animals tapped sticks together in rhythm, while the birds whistled and trilled cheerful tunes. Fireflies drifted in, their tiny lights blinking like stars scattered among the branches. Hazel danced with a circle of mice, her ears bouncing as they spun around. Pip showed off a few clumsy hops that made everyone laugh, and even Brindle, who usually preferred watching, was coaxed into a slow, heavy-footed shuffle that shook the ground. The silver watch ticked on through it all, steady and sure. Its face glowed in the lantern light, as though it approved of the joy around it. When the moon climbed high and the younger animals began to yawn, the crowd slowly thinned. Families made their way back through the woods, carrying baskets and lanterns. Soon, only Hazel, Finn, Pip, Brindle, and Elder remained beneath the willow. Hazel sat down in the soft grass, breathing in the cool night air. The scent of flowers, smoke, and sweet berries lingered. "Do you think the watch will keep ticking forever now?" she asked quietly. Elder ruffled his feathers, his eyes shining in the starlight. "Forever is a long word, my dear. But I believe it will tick as long as the forest has friends to care for it." Brindle nodded, his deep voice thoughtful. "Then it should tick for a very long time." Pip curled up near the roots, his tail draped across his nose. "I hope it ticks even when we're old and gray. I like to know it's still here when little ones come to play." Finn stretched his long legs and gave a wide yawn. "Old and gray? Speak for yourself. I'll still be the spryest frog in the forest." Hazel giggled, tucking her paws beneath her chin. "Then you can dance at every festival of the watch." "Gladly," Finn said with a wink. The group grew quiet after that, each lost in their own peaceful thoughts. Above them, the stars wheeled slowly across the sky. The forest had grown still, except for the soft murmur of the stream and the gentle ticking of the watch, steady as a heartbeat. It was in that calm silence that Hazel whispered, "It really does feel like time belongs to us now." And for the first time, no one felt the need to reply. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently through the willow branches, painting the clearing in stripes of gold and green. Hazel blinked awake, her whiskers twitching as the warmth touched her fur. Beside her, Pip was still curled like a little comma, his tail wrapped snugly around him. Brindle was snoring softly, leaning against the willow's trunk, while Finn sprawled on his back with his legs in the air, mumbling something about another slice of pie. Hazel stretched, her ears flicking toward the stand where the silver watch rested. It ticked steadily, gleaming in the early light. She patted closer, placing a paw gently on the shelf. Somehow, it felt as though the watch was breathing with the forest. A flutter of wings drew her gaze upward. Elder Owl, perched high above, was already awake, his feathers glowing faintly in the sun. "Good morning, little Hazel," he said warmly. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in a long time," Hazel replied with a smile. "It feels safe here." The others began to stir. Pip yawned so wide he nearly tipped over, and Brindle blinked slowly, rubbing his eyes with heavy paws. Finn rolled onto his belly, blinking at Hazel. "Tea," he croaked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Hazel laughed. "Always tea." Within an hour, they had gathered water from the stream and brewed a pot of sweet meadow tea. They sat in a circle beneath the willow, steam curling into the cool morning air. As they sipped, Pip's tail twitched with excitement. "What should we do today?" he asked. "We could go berry picking near the old orchard, or maybe fishing by the lake. Or, we could race down the hill by the thicket." Finn slurped loudly from his cup. "I vote for fishing. Less running, more sitting." Brindle shook his head with a chuckle. "We'll decide together. But first," he gestured to the watch, "I think we ought to promise something. Not just to keep it safe, but to come back to it. To make this place a meeting spot for us always." Hazel's eyes softened. "Yes, a promise." So they set down their cups and placed their paws, hands, and claws together in the grass. "To the watch," Finn declared. "To the forest," said Hazel. "To each other," Brindle rumbled. "And to all the adventures still waiting for us," Pip added with a grin. The watch ticked once, loudly and clearly, as though agreeing. After their promise beneath the willow, the friends set off toward the orchard Pip had mentioned. The path wound between tall grasses still wet with dew, their tips sparkling like sugar crystals. Birds darted overhead, chirping brightly, while the air smelled faintly of wild mint growing along the edges of the trail. Pip bounded ahead, his nose twitching. "I can smell the apples already," he called back. "And maybe some blackberries if we're lucky." Hazel's basket swung from her paw. "If we find blackberries, I'll make jam tonight. We still have plenty of bread left from Brindle's baking." Brindle puffed out his chest a little. "The bread will be even better tomorrow, once it's toasted and spread with butter. Or cheese," he added thoughtfully. "Sharp cheese, if we can trade for it from the field mice." Finn hopped along lazily at the back. "As long as there's pie, I'll be happy. Apple pie, berry pie, any pie will do." The orchard soon came into view. A wide stretch of old apple trees with twisted trunks and branches heavy with fruit. The grass beneath was dotted with mushrooms, and bees hummed busily around the blossoms that still clung to some of the branches. Hazel let out a delighted sigh. "Oh, look at them. Perfect and red." She reached up, plucking an apple and polishing it on her apron until it shone. The first bite was crisp and sweet, juice dripping down her chin. Brindle stretched to shake a low branch, sending a shower of apples tumbling into the grass. Pip darted back and forth, scooping them into Hazel's basket, his tail flicking with excitement. "We'll have enough for everyone in the clearing," he said. "Apple tarts, apple butter, apple everything." Finn flopped under a tree, biting into one with a crunch. "Don't forget cider," he mumbled, juice dribbling down his chin. They spent the morning filling baskets and giggling as apples bounced across the orchard. Hazel found a patch of late blackberries tucked in the shade, and her paws were soon stained purple. Pip returned triumphantly with a handful of wild herbs, thyme, sage, and a sprig of rosemary that he tucked behind his ear like a prize. By the time the sun stood high overhead, their baskets were full. Hazel spread a cloth in the grass, and they shared a simple meal. Fresh apples, hunks of bread, slices of dried sausage Brindle had carried in his satchel, and a small round of soft cheese wrapped in leaves. The taste of it all, the sharp cheese, the sweet fruit, the savory sausage, mixed together like a feast fit for a king, though they were only four friends sitting beneath the branches. Hazel leaned back against the trunk, licking blackberry juice from her paw. "This," she said with a happy sigh, "is exactly what I hoped for when I thought of silly adventures." And none of them could disagree. When their baskets were full and their bellies even fuller, the friends packed up what remained of their orchard feast. Pip insisted on carrying the herbs, for he had already begun dreaming up stews and teas, while Hazel carefully wrapped the blackberries for jam. Brindle hoisted the heaviest basket with ease, though Finn grumbled about carrying even one apple in his pocket. As they made their way back through the forest, the warm afternoon light slanted through the branches, dappling the path in shifting patterns. Bees buzzed lazily, and the air smelled faintly of thyme from the sprigs sticking out of Pip's fur. Back at Hazel's burrow, they set their harvest on the wooden table. Her home was small but cozy, with shelves lined with jars of jam, pickled roots, and dried herbs. A little fire crackled in the hearth, sending the scent of wood smoke curling through the room. Hazel tied an apron around her waist. "If someone fetches water, we can start the jam." Finn slouched into a chair. "I'll fetch it if you promise I don't have to stir. Last time I stirred, I ended up wearing more jam than the jars did." Brindle chuckled, already reaching for the kettle. "Then I'll fetch the water. You can slice apples instead. Surely even you can manage that." Soon the little kitchen was alive with motion. Pip sorted herbs into small bundles, setting rosemary aside for roasting apples later. Brindle measured sugar into a big pot, his movements slow and steady. Hazel stirred the bubbling blackberries until the rich purple mixture filled the room with sweetness. Finn, to everyone's surprise, did quite well slicing apples, though he ate every third slice before it reached the bowl. By evening, jars of glossy blackberry jam lined the shelves, cooling beside the fire. Hazel spread a bit on warm bread and passed pieces around. The taste was tart and sweet all at once, the kind of flavor that made everyone hum with delight. Pip licked his paws clean. "Tomorrow," he declared, "we'll bake a pie with the apples. And maybe Brindle will share some of his sausage again." Brindle smirked. "Only if someone else guards the pie from Finn." "I was helping." Finn protested, though his grin gave him away. The four of them laughed until their sides hurt, the jars of jam gleaming proudly behind them like trophies of a day well spent. The next morning dawned crisp and cool, with a hint of autumn in the air. A light breeze rustled through the golden leaves, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and wood smoke from far-off chimneys. Hazel's burrow was already warm with the fire she had stoked, and the table was laid with baskets of apples waiting to be turned into pie. Brindle rolled up his sleeves, though really he didn't need them, since his thick fur did the job already, and began kneading dough on the counter. His paws were large, but surprisingly gentle, pressing and folding the dough until it was smooth. "Watch carefully," he rumbled to Pip, who was perched on a stool. "A pie begins with patience." Pip's nose twitched as he leaned closer. "And end with cinnamon, I hope." He had set aside a small bundle of herbs and spices, including sticks of cinnamon traded from the traveling mice. Hazel sliced apples into neat wedges, sprinkling them with sugar and a pinch of nutmeg. The scent filled the kitchen, warm and comforting. Finn, meanwhile, had been assigned the task of buttering the pie tin, mostly because it was the one job he couldn't eat while doing. "You doubt my self-control," Finn said with mock offense, though his eyes kept straying to the bowl of sugared apples. "Because you don't have any," Hazel teased, passing him the tin. They worked together with ease, laughter bubbling up as the pie took shape. Brindle rolled out the crust, laying it carefully over the apples, while Hazel crimped the edges with her paws. Pip brushed the top with cream and sprinkled sugar over it until it sparkled. When at last the pie slid into the oven, a hush of satisfaction fell over the room. The four friends gathered around the hearth, mugs of spiced tea in their paws. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying fallen leaves that tapped softly against the window. Soon the scent of baking apples, butter, and cinnamon filled every corner of the burrow. It clung to their fur, wrapped around their whiskers, and made their stomachs growl in unison. Fin sniffed dramatically. This, my friends, is what heaven smells like. Hazel laughed, leaning back against her chair. Then heaven is nearly ready. When the pie was finally lifted from the oven, golden brown and bubbling at the edges, they could hardly wait for it to cool. They sliced it while it was still steaming, the crust flaking perfectly, the apples soft and sweet. They ate until the pie was gone, their laughter mixing with the ticking of the silver watch that had become part of every moment now, a quiet rhythm, like a heartbeat for their little world. The pie didn't last long, of course. By the time the evening shadows stretched across Hazel's burrow, only a few crumbs clung stubbornly to the plate. Finn licked his fingers happily, Pip sighed with satisfaction, and Brindle leaned back with the calm pride of a baker whose work had been well received. Hazel, however, was already thinking ahead. She wiped her paws on her apron and glanced toward the shelves lined with jars of jam and baskets of apples. "We should store some food for the winter," she said softly. "It's only just turning cold, but soon enough the snow will fall." Brindle nodded slowly. "You're right. A full pantry means peace of mind." Pip's ears perked. "Oh, we could dry more herbs and gather mushrooms to string up by the fire. And maybe make sausages the way the hedgehogs do, with garlic and sage." Finn groaned, though not from lack of interest. Do we always have to think of work right after a feast? His belly was round from too much pie, and he stretched out dramatically on the rug. "Let me at least dream of another slice before we go trudging through the woods." Hazel smiled, shaking her head. "No one's trudging tonight, but tomorrow we'll start. I'll make a list of what we need." She fetched a little book and wrote neatly: nuts, roots, mushrooms, herbs, flour, cheeses. The thought of cheeses set Pip chattering. There's a family of mice near the meadow who make cheese with nettles. And the badger cousins trade wheels of crumbly cheddar if you bring enough honey. At that, Brindle's eyes gleamed. Then perhaps a visit to the meadow is in order. The four of them spent the rest of the evening making plans, nibbling on bread spread with blackberry jam. The fire popped and crackled, and outside, the wind carried the sound of owls hooting across the dark forest. When at last they curled up to sleep, Hazel felt her heart full. The silver watch ticked gently on its shelf, steady and sure. She thought of the pies, the sausages, the cheeses yet to come, and smiled. For the first time in a long while, winter did not seem something to fear. It felt like a season to be shared. Morning came with a pale sky and the smell of damp leaves drifting in through Hazel's round window. The friends gathered around the table once more, this time not for a feast, but for planning. Hazel spread out her little list, smoothing it with careful paws. "First things first," she said, her ears twitching with excitement. "We need nuts. Walnuts, acorns, hazelnuts, anything that will keep." Pip bounced in his chair. "I know just the place. There's an old oak grove near the stream. The squirrels say it's heavy with acorns this year." Brindle folded his arms. "Then that's where we'll begin. But we'll need baskets. Strong ones." Hazel nodded. "And after nuts, mushrooms. We'll slice and string them to dry. Pip, you can show us which are good and which are not." "Of course," Pip said proudly, puffing his chest. "I never forget a mushroom once I've sniffed it." Finn yawned, rubbing his eyes. "And what about cheese? I've always start with that. Why waste time with acorns when we could be nibbling on something creamy and delicious?" Hazel laughed. "Cheese will come, Finn, but it's harder to carry than nuts. After a quick breakfast, thick slices of bread spread with blackberry jam, and a few wedges of Brindle's leftover sausage. They set out toward the oak grove. The baskets bumped lightly against their sides, and the cool air smelled of moss and wood smoke. The grove was just as Pip promised. The ground was carpeted with acorns, crunching under their paws with every step. Sunlight poured through the branches, turning the golden leaves into a canopy of fire. Hazel bent to gather a handful, dropping them into her basket with a satisfying clatter. "Oh, these are perfect!" Brindle worked steadily, his large paws filling the baskets quickly. Finn, meanwhile, tossed acorns into the air and tried to catch them in his mouth, missing more than he caught. Pip scurried about, sniffing each acorn as though it were a rare treasure. "These will roast nicely," he said. "A little salt, maybe a sprig of rosemary." Hazel paused, smiling at him. "You think of food in everything." "Of course I do," Pip replied cheerfully. "It makes the work lighter." By midday, their baskets were heavy. They stopped beneath a tree to share a simple meal. Bread, cheese traded from field mouse the week before, and a jar of sweet plum jam. The cheese was sharp and crumbly, the jam smooth and rich, and together they made a feast, even with only a little to go around. Hazel looked around at her friends, her heart warm. "This is how we'll get through winter," she said. "One basket, one loaf, one jar at a time." The afternoon sun slanted lower as they carried their heavy baskets back toward Hazel's burrow. The air was cool, but their fur was warm from the work. Every so often, Finn would sigh dramatically, pretending the weight was too much, only to wink when Hazel offered to trade with him. When they arrived, Brindle stacked the baskets neatly in a corner. "A fine start," he said, brushing his paws. "But we'll need more." Hazel nodded. "Tomorrow, mushrooms. The thicket near the stream should be full of them." The thought of mushrooms set Pip's tail twitching. "We'll dry some, stew some, and pickle the rest. I've been saving jars." Finn flopped into a chair. "You and your jars. We're going to end up living in a house made of jam and pickles at this rate." Hazel giggled as she lit the lanterns, filling the burrow with a soft, golden glow. Would that be so terrible? Dinner that night was simple but hearty. Brindle roasted a few handfuls of acorns with salt and rosemary, filling the room with a nutty, savory scent. Hazel sliced apples. Pip brought out his bundle of herbs to make a bright, minty tea, and Finn, true to his word, did nothing but eat. They sat together at the table, sharing food and stories. Pip told a dramatic tale about chasing a beetle through tall grass, though no one was quite sure it was true, and Brindle recounted the time a hedgehog tried to trade him a sack of leaves for a loaf of bread. By the time the fire had burned low, their bellies were full, and Hazel had tucked away jars of roasted acorns for winter. She glanced at the silver watch on its shelf, ticking steadily, and felt reassured. Time was moving forward, but they were keeping pace with it, basket by basket, meal by meal. Before sleep, they made a plan. Tomorrow would be mushrooms, the day after herbs, and soon, perhaps, a journey to trade for cheeses and sausages in the meadow. Hazel curled up in her bed, the smell of roasted acorns still clinging to the air, and thought, "Winter will come, but we'll be ready, together." The next morning, a soft mist lay over the forest, curling around tree trunks and clinging to spiderwebs like tiny pearls. Hazel and her friends set out early, baskets swinging from their paws and tails, their breath puffing in little clouds. "The mushrooms grow thick in this damp weather," Pip explained, nose twitching. "But remember, some are friends, some are foes. Only take the ones I point out." Finn made a face. "Last time I picked mushrooms without you, I nearly cooked us a shoe." Brindle chuckled. "A very chewy shoe at that." Soon they reached the thicket near the stream. The ground was soft and dark, perfect for mushrooms. Hazel crouched low, brushing leaves aside, and gasped at the sight of pale, round caps peeking through the moss. Pip darted over, sniffed carefully, then gave a firm nod. Safe and delicious when stewed with onions. They worked slowly, gathering plump mushrooms and tucking them into their baskets. Pip hummed as he went, naming each one with reverence. Button caps, penny buns, golden chanterelles. Finn tried to repeat the names, but tangled them up until everyone was laughing. By midday, their baskets were nearly full. Hazel suggested they rest, so Brindle spread a cloth by the stream. They unpacked their meal. Thick slices of nut bread, a wheel of soft cheese wrapped in leaves, and a jar of honeycomb traded from the bees. Hazel drizzled honey over her bread, watching it glisten in the sunlight. Pip sprinkled a few thyme leaves on his cheese, sighing happily at the taste. Finn dunked his bread straight into the honey jar, while Brindle ate slowly, savoring each bite. The meal was simple, but the sound of the stream, the mist lifting from the trees, and the scent of thyme and honey made it feel like a feast. Hazel thought to herself that food always tasted better when it was shared outdoors. After lunch, they continued gathering mushrooms until their baskets overflowed. Pip showed them how to string the mushrooms on a twine, ready to be hung by Hazel's hearth to dry. As they walked home through the quiet woods, Hazel felt a warm pride. The shelves in her burrow would soon be lined with jars and bundles, each meal a memory of a day spent together. The silver watch would tick through the winter, she thought, but so would the little treasures they were gathering. The smell of herbs, the taste of honey, the comfort of bread and cheese. By the time they returned to Hazel's burrow, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky in soft strokes of pink and gold. The air was cooler now, carrying with it the faint scent of fallen leaves. Inside, Hazel hung strings of mushrooms near the hearth, where the gentle warmth would dry them slowly. Pip bustled about, tying knots and making sure none of the mushrooms touched. Air around each one, he reminded, where they'll sulk and spoil. Finn plopped into a chair, balancing a mushroom cap on his head like a hat. How do I look? Like dinner, Brindle rumbled, setting down the baskets. Hazel giggled as she tied another string. More like trouble. Once the mushrooms were hung, they turned to supper. Brindle sliced thick wedges of cheese, while Hazel laid out bread and a small jar of blackberry jam. Pip added sprigs of rosemary to a pot of hot water, filling the room with a soothing scent. The meal was plain but comforting. Bread spread with jam and cheese, roasted acorns from the night before, and cups of warm rosemary tea. The flavors mingled, sweet, sharp, and nutty, like a quiet song that filled their bellies and hearts. As they ate, they spoke of what they'd gather next. Roots, Hazel said, chewing thoughtfully. Carrots, parsnips, turnips. They'll keep well through the cold. And chestnuts, Pip added eagerly. We can roast them over the fire until they pop. Finn licked jam from his fingers. I'd rather we just make another pie. You and your pies, Brindle said, though he was smiling. After supper, they cleaned the table and stacked the dishes, then curled up near the hearth. Hazel stretched out on a cushion, Pip nestled in a blanket, and Finn snored almost immediately. Brindle sat quiet and steady, eyes half closed, listening to the fire crackle. On the shelf, the silver watch ticked softly, its sound steady and sure. Hazel listened as her eyes drifted shut, the rhythm like a lullaby. She thought of roots, chestnuts, and the warmth of bread, and felt certain that winter would be full, not only of food, but of laughter and friendship. The next morning, the forest felt crisper, as though the air itself was sharpening in preparation for autumn's full embrace. Hazel and her friends bundled themselves in scarves and set out once more, their baskets swinging at their sides. Today's task, roots and chestnuts. They followed the winding path toward the meadow gardens, where the earth was rich and soft. Hazel dug carefully with a small wooden spade, pulling free carrots still dusted with soil. Pip brushed them off with delicate paws, humming a tune as he lined them neatly in a row. Look at the color, Hazel said, holding one up to the light, like a little torch. Finn, meanwhile, was struggling with a stubborn parsnip. He tugged and tugged until, with a sudden pop, it flew from the ground and landed squarely in Brindle's basket. Brindle raised one brow, but said nothing, which sent Hazel and Pip into fits of laughter. By midday, their baskets were brimming with roots. They sat under a spreading oak to share lunch. Thick slices of nut bread, wedges of tangy goat cheese, and little pots of plum jam. Finn spread cheese and jam together on his bread, earning a doubtful look from Pip, until Pip tried a bite and immediately made his own. After their meal, they wandered to the chestnut grove. The ground was littered with spiny husks, cracked open to reveal glossy brown treasures inside. Brindle's strong paws made quick work of gathering them, while Hazel and Pip pried open the easier shells. Finn, of course, popped one into his mouth raw and regretted it almost instantly. "Patience," Brindle said, chuckling. "They're best when roasted." By the time the sun dipped toward the horizon, their baskets were full again, this time with roots bundled in cloth and chestnuts shining like polished stones. On the way home, Hazel felt a warm glow of contentment. Their shelves were filling quickly, and each day's work felt lighter with friends beside her. The forest around them hummed with quiet life. The rustle of dry leaves, the whisper of the wind, the call of an owl waking for the night. As they neared the burrow, Hazel thought of the coming winter evenings, a fire crackling, tea steeping, chestnuts popping over the flames. It would be a season not of worry, but of comfort. The next few days passed in a gentle rhythm, gathering, storing, cooking, and laughing. By the time the first frost touched the meadow grass, Hazel's burrow was a treasure trove. Strings of mushrooms hung like garlands. Jars of jam and pickles lined the shelves. Baskets of roots rested in the corner, and chestnuts were stacked neatly by the hearth. The air itself seemed full of rosemary, thyme, and sweet fruit. On the morning the frost came, Hazel woke to find her little window rimmed with white. The world outside sparkled as though dusted with sugar. She wrapped herself in a shawl and peeked at the silver watch on the shelf. It ticked steadily, marking the turn of seasons, just as it always had. That evening, she invited her friends for a feast to celebrate their hard work. Brindle brought sausages wrapped in leaves, Pip prepared a pot of onion and mushroom stew, and Finn, at last, baked the promised apple pie. Hazel set the table with care. Slices of cheese, little bowls of blackberry jam, warm loaves of nut bread, and roasted chestnuts that cracked and steamed as they were peeled. The burrow glowed with lantern light. Outside, the wind whispered through bare branches, but inside was warmth and cheer. They ate until their bellies were full, laughing at Finn's stories, sighing at Pip's fussing over flavors, and smiling at Brindle's steady calm. When the plates were cleared and the fire burned low, they sat together in quiet. Hazel looked around at her friends, the shelves of food, and the little silver watch ticking on the mantel. A deep peace settled over her. "Winter will come," she said softly, "but we'll be ready. We'll have food and fire and each other." Brindle nodded. Pip sipped his tea. Finn licked the last crumbs of pie from his paw. And in the heart of the forest, while frost glimmered outside, for friends sat safe and cozy, their laughter mingling with the crackle of the fire, knowing that whatever the season brought, they would face it together. The silver watch ticked on, steady as ever. The end. Thank you for joining Hazel, Brindle, Pip, and Finn on their adventure. If you enjoyed this story, check out our channel for more magical forest tales and cozy adventures waiting just for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back soon for the next story. Bye-bye.